I'd like to introduce Linda Price. She is one of our volunteers here at the museum and a longtime member of the Onega Historical Society, quite a historian, and she has taken an interest into delving into the life and times of Thomas C. Hinkle. And so she will present her information today for everyone to enjoy.
Okay, well, thank you very much. This is Victory Schoolhouse, and I attended it for 6 years. And our library consisted of, right here, there were 4 shelves, and we had several of Dr. Thomas C. Hinkle's books. And by the time you get into 4th grade and 5th grade, you can start to read them and enjoy them. But they were about dogs and horses, 2 of my favorite subjects. And I had no clue that he actually had lived here in Onega and that he had actually come to this very building. My mother told the story about my oldest brother Clayton sitting here on the steps, and this tall, gray, distinguished looking man was standing there, and he was telling him how great those Thomas C. Hinkle books were. And Dr. Hinkle was so quiet, unassuming. He didn't tell my brother that that was him, not at all. But Dr. Hinkle wrote 40-some books, and he wrote a variety. One of the most interesting ones, well, for his life, he came from St. Clair, Illinois by wagon train, and they settled north of Junction City. He said it was with the coyotes and hardscrabble. And then when he was 7, they moved to Junction City. But he was a young man at the time when the U.S. cavalry were big. And hear all the horse stories and Indian stories there, and buffaloes, and the buffalo hunters were coming through and giving stories about horses and dogs. So he remembered them. And he remembered one of his greatest thrills was to see Comanche. And Comanche put his head down and he petted him. And when Comanche died, he was stuffed and donated to the University of Kansas in the museum there of natural history. Let's see. Most of his books did deal with horses and dogs, but I think the thing that really impressed me were his descriptions. He described exactly how a horse acts, because they're not toy horses, they're not Pegasus, and they're not unicorns, they're real horses. And his dogs acted like real dogs. And some of his books were, I guess you'd call it historical fiction maybe, stories about one particular dog. And he will write in his books a preface telling about that, or a horse about that. This one, let's see, where is it? Black Storm. My daughter, this is in paperback. And this was a real horse that outran a officer's horse at Fort Riley. And he probably saw it, or he was told about it. He probably saw it. Anyway, so, and this is a scholastic, so this is current. After he graduated from high school in Junction City, then he went to Washburn, actually the Kansas Medical College, and that was connected to Washburn University. And he did that for 3 years, and then the 4th year it was combined with KU, so he actually has a degree in medicine from KU. He worked at a blacksmith shop after school, after classes and weekends, and that's how he paid his way through. He had practiced medicine, and in our book that I have here, I have all this in detail. How he practiced medicine for maybe like 20 years, and then as I say, we have it all in detail at the museum. Then he decided to become a minister, and he went to Baldwin City, to the Congregational Church place to be that. And he married his wife, Roxanne. She was from Stockton, Kansas. And I think his first place he was situated was at Baldwin. There were various places. He always was in Kansas. He wrote some books similar to Peter Rabbit books, a series of 3 or 4 of those called Dr. something, and about the coyote and the cottontail and so forth, which they're little books. I've seen them on the internet, and they can be purchased with money from somebody somewhere. He got to Onega, and he was seemingly very happy here, and lived very quietly. He assisted the 2 physicians, Dr. Walsh and Dr. Fleckenstein, with surgeries. Hazel Weiss remembers him walking by and to go play cards with the doctors, and her dog just barked at him, didn't like him at all. Let's see, and my sister Margie Wilson, she remembers him coming to the farm where my parents lived, south of Onega, and she gave the example, if my dad was out digging post holes, well, he'd just go out and help him. Anyway, let's see. What else should we cover?
So when did he start writing books?
Back in the 1920s, when he was at Baldwin City. And he suffered 2 nervous breakdowns in his life, and he came to realize it was what he was eating, his food. And so he wrote a book called How to Eat to Calm Your Nerves. And Thomas Edison, he gave lectures. He traveled around the United States. He met Count Tolstoy, the Russian prince, even in one of his lectures. Thomas Edison wrote him a letter, which I have a copy of here, saying what he ate for breakfast and lunch and supper. But Thomas Edison was probably, one of the top scientists, one of the very top scientists in the nation, actually. But I imagine he was nervous. The pressure on the guy was tremendous. It's in here. As I say, I was planning on talking to people. And Neva, she remembers him. She said he was a very distinguished-looking gentleman. That was her comment. And Mary Pennick said he had such wonderful books. When he passed away, the Wamego Times had quite a large write-up about him.
So when did
He died in May 13th of 1949. He had a blood clot, and because he had visited in length with them at Wamego, and their comment was, Pottawatomie County has lost a very valuable citizen.
So how old was he?
He was 72 or so. 72. And his wife, he and his wife are buried in Wamego on the southeast corner lot with the plainest headstone there was. I had to look and look for it, but I did find it. And he said here, like how he sold his books. He said, well, my best markets are the schools and the libraries and the Christmas counters. He said, in the Onega Library there's a complete set of his work, and nearly every library in the United States contains some of his writings. His books in 43 states, they considered him in the 1940s supplemental reading for kids because no one had anything to complain about there. But he loved being in a small town and being almost invisible. But he was planning on writing his autobiography. He was telling them all about it and how it was going to take 2 years. And then he died the next week. So, because that would have been really interesting, really interesting.
So was he living in Wamego at the time?
No, he lived here at Onega.
Is that
He
where he
lived
died?
right by the Congregational Church.
So did he die in Onega?
Yes, he died of a blood clot. But he was very much exercised. Hazel Weiss remembers seeing him out walking all the time. In his book, How to Eat, he tells you to do lots of exercise and eat very little and chew your food very thoroughly and sip water. Don't just gulp it down. And I know I don't do those things either. But anyway, he's talked about frequently, he said, when he was a kid, like if he took a thirsty horse to drink, as a farm boy, he said, I'd lead a very thirsty horse from the field to the water tank, how rapidly he'd swallow. And if my father were with me after the horse had drunk for a little while, I'd say, make him hold his head up. Frequently, when I did so, the horse would draw a long breath and then drink no more. Had he gone right on drinking as a thirsty horse, well, if you will permit him to do so, he might have drunk twice as much as was good for him. And that's the way people eat. As a result, the horse that drinks and drinks and drinks when he's very thirsty sometimes dies a few hours later. And he said, I have seen a horse die from drinking too much water, and I've also seen people die in a few hours after a terrible gorge that they could not get rid of. Do you know that most nervous people have a way of sitting down to the table and eating until they're literally full? If you could take out the stomach of such a person and look at it, the sight would frighten you, and for a good reason. For this habit, many nervous people have dilated their stomachs. But if you would correct their manner of eating, there is usually enough tone in the muscular wall of the stomach to get it back to normal. I marvel again and again about how miraculously nature restores herself even after she's been terribly abused, if only she is given a chance. But I love his description, of course, from a medical standpoint. But he didn't really practice medicine here other than assistant surgeries. But very well respected person.
So he was just primarily an author at that point in time?
Yeah, he was, and a congregational minister. Because he also, my oldest brother, who had told him how great his books were, he was killed by a drunk driver in Wamego, and Dr. Hinkle, he did his funeral. But I don't remember the man because I was born in 44 and I wasn't old enough to remember too much of anything. I mean, I remember some things. I remember when I was 2 coming to the Christmas store Christmas Eve, and I remember how hot it was in this building, and I had to sit on my mother's lap, and I just didn't want to do that. And then we went home, and miraculously under the Christmas tree was a toy horse. And I still have that horse. So that horse has got a lot of years on it. But it's strange how one or two things, way back in your mind, you can remember. Okay, well, thank you much. I hope anybody will donate some more of his books. They can be bought. This book is out on public domain. There probably all are, maybe. But there's the Gutenberg. The first book ever printed was a Gutenberg Bible in Germany. Well, these guys got together and decided that we should, some of these things like this, his writings should be out there for the public. And so you can print it off the internet. And he was impressed too. He was setting out western Kansas, maybe when he was at Pretty Prairie. He was signed there for a short time. But he saw a painting of an old so many mast, 3-mast ship or something sailing and looking, and he said, "I've never been so powerfully impressed by any picture. It seemed like fairly to speak to me. I took an envelope from my pocket and set down the verses given here. These verses were afterward published in 1 or 2 metropolitan papers. Mr. James Bryce, the English ambassador at Washington, saw them and wrote me a beautiful letter about them, in which he said, 'Your little poem, The Last Journey, attracts me very much.' You see, he was beginning to grow old, and I knew that was the reason these lines of mine made an appeal to him. Not very long after this, I also got a letter from the verses from Dr. Osler, then Regius Professor of Medicine at Oxford, like in England. In it he said, 'I have read your little poem, The Last Journey, with unusual interest, and again I knew why. You see, it does not matter very much what our rank or our station here, no matter whether a human being is a king or what his station in life may be, he is still a human being. We are all reaching out for the same great thing. The fine thing about the sentiment of these little verses is that although you wish not to believe it, it is coming true anyway.' It's called The Last Journey. Very short. One night, when in a youthful dream, I saw a moonlit sea, and sailing o'er its dark expanse, a ship of mystery. The lonely traveler seemed to be on some great mission bound, as o'er the darkened waters it sailed without a sound. Long years have passed, old age has come, the fire of life is low. Again I think that strange dream of youth so long ago. And in the ship that swiftly sailed that silent moonlit sea, I seem to see a storm-tossed soul bound for eternity. Now to my mind this sweet dream comes, a peaceful memory, for soon I'll be a youth again with immortality." But he wrote quite a variety of things, but I loved his dog and horse stories. They were my favorite. And this was really good about eating too. It really brings across the point. Chew your food and eat your apples.
Do you have some of his books we could?
Yes, I have some of his books. Well, this is How to Eat to Calm Your Nerves. And this one is Dusty. This is Dusty. Oh, and they had wolf dogs too. People had wolf dog packs to kill wolves, because in the old Kansas, wolves were terrible because they killed lots of cattle and horses and silver. This is Mary Pennick's first book. It was well used. And Mustang. One of these books came from this school. I think was it this one? I'm not sure. Well, anyway, this was Mustang. There are several more.
How many did you say total he wrote?
Around 42 or so. And here's Black Storm back on Scholastic. And this is Shag. This was the wolf dog, and how he fell out of the back of a covered wagon. And this could be a true one. Yes, author's note, this is a true story. People had like the big Russian wolfhounds. And this one fell out of back end of a wagon, covered wagon or some kind of wagon. And anyway, I believe the wolves actually, they didn't kill him. Somehow her pups had gotten killed, and she adopted this one. But this is a true story.
how many of those books do you have?
Well, I was going to give all of these to the museum except the one about eating, because my daughter bought me that for birthday. I would get
I
shot.
didn't know if you had all 42 of them.
No. This is it. And I know one of these books came from this lot.
There's one over here.
Oh, okay. Maybe. Oh, and this is the one. Well, this is the one Will James had illustrated. This is a true story, Tornado Boy. This is a true story. And about a real character and his name. And but I've read all these books. One person commented, well, they're all similar. Well, there had to be something happen, but it's kind of the formula for writing books. And he talks about Black Sword in here also. Anyway, but I was always very impressed. And I know one of these books says Victory Schoolhouse on it. And another book I found where I was a librarian in Wichita, they were going to get rid of it, so I grabbed a hold of it, hung on to it. Well, thank you very much.
I was going to show the picture. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, now
We want to thank you, Linda, for taking the time to prepare the presentation today and to share it. We'll share it out through the Facebook. And even though we don't have an audience here today, we know there will be a Facebook audience. So I'll give you a round of applause.
you can put what I wrote on the internet, you know.
I can scan that and put it in.
Yes, by all means.
I will do that for everyone that is out there. Because I know there are some of you who commented that either knew Dr. Hinkle or you had read his books. So we want you to have the information that Linda has shared today. Thank you very much. Before we close, just a couple of things I want to bring to your attention. Tomorrow there will be a flag retirement ceremony at 4:30. And in talking with Jean Gilsdorf, if it is raining, we will have a ceremonial, symbolic retirement in our Morton building. So rain or shine, 4:30 tomorrow we will have the flag retirement as well as the presentation of some pins to some Vietnam veterans. Next Saturday, Robin Colderman will be doing a presentation on old cameras and using some of the cameras here in our museum to illustrate some of the different types of cameras that were out there and the different types of photos. A way to help us right now at the museum with our building fund is to purchase quilt tickets. We have one denim quilt and one polyester quilt. Both of them will live forever. They're virtually indestructible. You may purchase those tickets at the bank, at the animal clinic, at the coffee barn, and at Designs or here at the museum. We appreciate your support in this particular project because it is the proceeds of that will be matched by the Carl and Mary Swartz estate. And finally, anyone that would like to have a calendar of June, just contact the museum and we'll make sure you get a calendar of our activities, and we'll make sure you get a July calendar when it's ready to put out. We thank you for being a part of our program and the support that you give us. Thank you.